What if I told you that seeing your future could become your greatest nightmare? And that sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't what lies ahead, but how desperately we try to control it. The cafeteria buzzed with the familiar soundtrack of teenage chaos, laughter echoing off the walls while trays clattered in rhythmic percussion. I sat alone at my usual table, eyes glued to my phone screen, scrolling through endless social media feeds in a mindless ritual that had become my daily escape from the brutal reality of high school existence. I was a junior student who liked to think of myself as mysteriously intelligent, choosing solitude over social interaction to maintain some kind of enigmatic persona. But the harsh truth was that my introverted nature kept me trapped in the shadows, crippling any chance I had to climb the merciless social hierarchy that ruled our school. My interests didn't help my cause either. Instead of sports or mainstream pop culture, I was passionate about technology and coding, spending countless hours immersed in niche simulation games that most of my classmates would find utterly boring. I felt like a ghost wandering through the hallways, slipping between social cracks, while precious time ticked away, knowing I was missing out on making those lasting connections that would supposedly define my entire lifetime. The cafeteria served as a perfect microcosm of high school society, with everyone naturally segregated into their familiar cliques, like pieces on a chessboard. The athletes dominated one section, their voices booming with confidence as they relived their latest victories. On the opposite side, the theater kids gestured dramatically while discussing their upcoming production with infectious enthusiasm. And there I sat, a lone figure surrounded by the symphony of teenage social interaction, my phone serving as a protective barrier between me and a world that seemed impossibly complex to navigate. I desperately wished I could be like them, effortlessly moving through conversations and friendships, but self-doubt clung to me like a persistent shadow that grew darker every time I attempted to break free. I couldn't stop comparing myself to everyone around me, constantly measuring my worth against their apparent success and happiness, a destructive habit that only reinforced my status as a social outsider. If you're enjoying this journey into the dark side of seeing the future, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because your support gives this channel the strength to bring you more mind-bending stories that will keep you questioning reality. And don't forget to check the description for details about our exciting giveaway contest that could change your own future. As I scrolled through my feed, half listening to the conversation swirling around me, something suddenly caught my attention, like a lightning bolt piercing through my digital haze. A group of students at the nearby table were animatedly discussing some mysterious new app, their voices bubbling with genuine excitement about something that sounded too incredible to believe. "It shows you yourself from the future," one girl exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with wonder as she gestured wildly with her hands. "It's like looking into a crystal ball," another voice chimed in enthusiastically. "I saw myself in Paris working at some prestigious fashion company. I mean, it's probably complete nonsense, but it's absolutely fascinating." Their words sent an electric thrill through my entire body, an app that could somehow reveal glimpses of what lay ahead in the mysterious realm of tomorrow. It sounded completely insane, like something straight out of a science fiction movie, but it also sparked something deep within my imagination that I hadn't felt in months. The future was something I fantasized about constantly, especially when the present felt so suffocatingly unbearable and filled with endless disappointments. A glimmer of hope for better times ahead was exactly what I needed to cope with the crushing weight of my current reality. something tangible to hold on to amidst the sea of uncertainty and doubt. The thought lingered in my mind throughout the entire day, like a persistent whisper that refused to fade into the background noise of my consciousness. As the final bell rang and the hallways slowly emptied of their human cargo, I found myself genuinely excited to go home and investigate this mysterious application that promised to unlock the secrets of tomorrow, even if it turned out to be nothing more than elaborate digital entertainment. It might provide the inspiration and hope that my desperate soul craved like water in a desert. Fortunately for my curiosity, I had managed to catch the name during those girls' animated conversation, and that single word echoed in my mind like a magical incantation. Mirror me. Later that evening, as the sun disappeared behind the horizon and darkness embraced my bedroom, I found myself staring at the AP store on my phone with trembling fingers. There it was, exactly as I had hoped to find it. Mirror me. The icon glowed mysteriously on my screen, a simple mirror design with an infinity symbol etched precisely in the center, suggesting endless possibilities and eternal reflections. The reviews were absolutely glowing with praise, filled with testimonials from people claiming it had completely transformed their entire existence in ways they never thought possible. It seemed like wild exaggeration, the kind of hyperbolic nonsense you'd expect from paid promotional content, but the prospect was far too tempting to resist. Like a siren's call from the future I desperately wanted to believe in, it beckoned me forward with promises of revelation and transformation. My thumb hovered nervously over the download button, excitement mingling with anticipation as my heart raced with possibilities. Taking a deep breath to steady my nerves, I tapped the screen decisively and watched as the application began its digital journey onto my device. As the app downloaded, my mind raced with possibilities, exploring every potential scenario that might unfold before my eyes. Yet despite my excitement, I still carried a healthy dose of skepticism about the whole endeavor, because extraordinary claims required extraordinary evidence. The application promised to show accurate predictions of my future self that would update in real time, but the realist buried deep within my consciousness remained firmly grounded in practical expectations. The description sounded almost futuristic, too good to be true, like something from a movie about advanced artificial intelligence and time travel. The reviews were overwhelmingly positive, with users claiming it had granted them miraculous glimpses into tomorrow, transformative experiences that had allegedly changed their lives forever. However, it wasn't particularly difficult to question the intelligence and critical thinking skills of the general population, especially when it came to believing in magical solutions to life's complex problems. I took another deep breath, perhaps more dramatic than the moment truly warranted, and opened the mysterious application that promised to reveal my destiny. The screen flickered to life with digital energy, a loading icon spinning hypnotically for several long moments before requesting permission to access my camera, which I naturally granted without hesitation. When the camera activated, it snapped a picture of my face with clinical precision, then processed the image through whatever algorithmic magic powered this technological marvel. Moments later, it revealed an image that looked unmistakably like me, but somehow fundamentally different, in ways that made my pulse quicken. I blinked hard and stared at the screen in absolute amazement, because there I was, but transformed into something I had only dared to dream about. The image showed me as a successful software developer, standing confidently in a sleek modern office that radiated professional success and technological innovation. I was wearing a perfectly tailored suit, that exuded confidence and authority, a stark contrast to the insecure teenager currently staring at this miraculous vision. My future self appeared completely assured and happy, radiating the kind of self-confidence that I had always desperately craved, but never seemed to possess. My heart raced with overwhelming excitement and disbelief as I whispered to myself, "Is this really going to be me?" I reached out tentatively to touch the screen, half expecting the miraculous image to vanish like a desert mirage, but it remained solid and tantalizingly real. This vision filled me with a surge of motivation, unlike anything I had experienced in months, possibly years of feeling lost and directionless. The next day, I walked into school with renewed energy coursing through my veins, eager to take concrete steps toward making that incredible future become my reality. I raised my hand confidently in class, providing answers with newfound assurance and feeling an electric thrill every time I successfully contributed to discussions. I even gathered the courage to join the school's coding club, something I had always wanted to do, but never had the confidence to attempt before seeing my future success. My parents noticed the dramatic transformation almost immediately, their expressions shifting from concern to pride as they witnessed my newfound enthusiasm for life. At dinner, my mother smiled warmly at me, her eyes sparkling with maternal pride as she remarked, "You've been really engaged lately. It's wonderful to see you coming out of your shell." I couldn't help but beam with genuine happiness, feeling for the first time in years that my future might actually be as bright and promising as the app had revealed. The application had granted me a precious glimpse of a life worth striving for, and I was absolutely determined to work tirelessly toward making that vision my concrete reality. Each passing day brought me one step closer to that transformative future, and it felt as if the entire universe had shifted, opening up possibilities I had never dared to imagine. The initial excitement from using the Mirror Me application gradually evolved from a thrilling discovery into a daily routine that governed my morning ritual. Every single morning, I would eagerly check the app to see if my future self had undergone any changes, desperately hoping to catch some new information about the life I was working so diligently toward. For the most part, the image remained reassuringly consistent, showing me as successful and confident, socially navigating a world that I had previously only fantasized about from the sidelines. But then something began to change, subtle at first, like shadows creeping across a sunny landscape. I started noticing small discrepancies in the reflections that didn't seem to make logical sense based on my current reality. It began almost imperceptibly, a tiny bruise appearing on my future self's arm that I couldn't remember receiving in my present life. I shrugged off this minor inconsistency, convincing myself that the app was simply adding realistic details to create a more compelling narrative for my entertainment. In the following days, however, the discrepancies became increasingly difficult to ignore or rationalize away. A faint scratch materialized on my future self's cheek, followed by another bruise, this time more pronounced and disturbing than the previous marks. I felt a cold knot of anxiety forming in my stomach as I watched these changes unfold, trying desperately to shake off the growing feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with this technological marvel. During a particularly engaging coding club meeting, I was enthusiastically working on some hardware components, carefully swapping around various electronic parts with practiced precision. The edges of an input-output shield were surprisingly sharp, and while maneuvering something into position, I accidentally caught my hand on the jagged metal edge. It was nothing more than a minor injury, barely worthy of notice, just a brief sting followed by a small trickle of blood that I quickly cleaned up. This kind of minor mishap simply came with the territory of working with electronic components, so I thought absolutely nothing of the insignificant accident. However, later that night, when I checked the app as part of my established routine, my blood ran cold with terror. There it was, the exact same cut, mirrored perfectly on my future self's hand, positioned in precisely the same location with identical characteristics. Panic set in immediately as I stared alternately at the cut on my real hand and its supernatural reflection in the app, feeling a cold dread rising from the depths of my soul. I had initially been using the app simply as a confidence-boosting tool, a harmless way to visualize success and motivation. But this revelation bled the fantasy into the terrifying realm of reality. The implications of this discovery sent my mind into an uncontrollable spiral of fear and confusion that threatened to overwhelm my rational thinking. If the app was accurately predicting these seemingly random events, then what other future horrors might it be able to foresee with supernatural accuracy? I tried desperately to muster as much doubt and skepticism as possible, but the evidence was undeniably clear, and I became increasingly anxious about the future that seemed to be closing in around me like a tightening noose. I became completely obsessed with finding answers, checking the app constantly with fingers that seemed to itch every spare moment for the reassurance or terror that awaited on that glowing screen. Every so often, a new scar or injury would appear on my future self's body, and each time this supernatural phenomenon occurred, my mind raced desperately trying to figure out how to prevent these mishaps from becoming my inevitable reality. Sleepless nights became my routine as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every single decision I had made during each day, analyzing them for potential consequences I might have missed. Each day brought increased paranoia about every choice I faced, no matter how trivial it might seem to an outside observer. Should I cross this street even though the road appears completely clear? I need to reach something from a high shelf. But is it truly safe? Is the food I'm considering eating still within its expiration date? The app that had once served as my lifeline to hope had transformed into a merciless tormentor, a digital mirror reflecting my deepest fears and anxieties back at me with cruel precision. It had become a ticking clock counting down to a future I felt powerless to change or escape from, no matter how hard I tried to alter my path. In quiet moments alone with my increasingly dark thoughts, I began to understand the true cost of seeing the future with such terrifying clarity. The blissful ignorance that had once protected my peace of mind was gone forever, replaced by an endless spiral of panic as I tried desperately to avoid a future that seemed to grow darker and more ominous with each passing day. As days transformed into weeks, my unhealthy obsession with the Mirror Me application grew exponentially, and it began to take a devastating toll on every aspect of my life. After every single decision I made during the day, I would compulsively check to see if the future image had improved or worsened based on my choices and actions. Sometimes I would do something that seemed to improve the image slightly, providing brief moments of hope, but the overall trajectory always seemed to be on a slow but steady decline towards something terrible. The confident, accomplished man who had initially inspired me to change my life was slowly deteriorating before my eyes, becoming a shadow of the success I had once aspired to achieve. I found myself withdrawing completely from friends and family, each social interaction now tinged with silent fear that something catastrophic might happen, as a direct result of my participation in normal human activities. The terrifying idea of causing some unseen ripple effect in the fabric of reality haunted my every waking moment, making me paranoid about even the most innocent conversations. Social gatherings became dangerous, minefields of potential disasters waiting to explode if I made a single wrong move or said something that might alter the timeline. Would starting a friendship with someone new be the catalyst for some future disaster? Would cutting ties with someone actually save me from a worse fate? These torturous questions plagued my mind every time I interacted with another human being. I started canceling plans and making elaborate excuses to avoid any social outings that might somehow contribute to the dark future the app kept showing me. I convinced myself that this isolation was necessary for my future success, that I needed to focus exclusively on my studies and personal achievement to somehow get the image back on track toward the bright future I had initially seen. But deep in my heart, I knew the real reason was my overwhelming fear of what the app might reveal about the consequences of normal human connection. Sitting alone at lunch, I watched my former friends and potential future acquaintances from a safe distance, feeling an acute pang of longing as they laughed and joked together in carefree happiness. I desperately wanted to join them, to be part of their world again. But paralyzing fear held me captive in my self-imposed prison of isolation. I'm doing this for my future, I reminded myself like a desperate mantra, though the crushing loneliness hung around my shoulders like a heavy cloak that grew heavier with each passing day. I buried myself completely in schoolwork, hoping desperately that academic success would somehow counterbalance the growing isolation that was consuming my life like a spreading disease. But no matter how excellently I performed in class, no matter how many perfect grades I achieved, the app continued to show me visions of a future that seemed increasingly bleak and hopeless. What made the situation infinitely worse was that sometimes I would be granted a precious glimmer of hope, a tiny improvement in the picture that would temporarily lift my spirits before crushing them again. Yet it was always nearly impossible to pinpoint exactly what had caused the positive change. Was it something I ate? Something I said to someone? Or perhaps just a random thought that would somehow inspire improvement in the distant future? These moments of hope were frustratingly rare and fleeting, despite my desperate attempts to understand and replicate whatever had caused the temporary improvement. There was no denying that despite these occasional bright spots, my future was locked in a steady decline toward something that filled me with existential dread. Slowly, but inexorably, my future self looked increasingly isolated and unhappy. The cheerful surroundings that had once filled me with hope gradually dwindling away like flowers dying in winter. The once confident figure now appeared completely hollow, his eyes shadowed with the unbearable weight of solitude that mirrored my own growing despair. My heart sank deeper with each viewing, feeling the walls of my self-created prison closing in around me with suffocating inevitability. The image of future success that had initially inspired me now felt like a cruel joke, a taunting specter of what I was apparently sacrificing everything to achieve, without any guarantee of actually reaching that goal. I had become a prisoner of my own misguided ambition, trapped in a vicious cycle that spiraled downward no matter what desperate measures I took to change course. In my desperation to somehow alter this grim future, I decided to take matters into my own hands through the only means I understood: technology and code. I began spending countless hours attempting to reverse engineer the application, hoping against hope to find some way to alter its predictions, or at least understand the mechanism behind its supernatural accuracy. I scoured online forums dedicated to app development, downloaded sophisticated analysis tools, and immersed myself completely in endless lines of complex code, convinced that if I could understand how the app truly worked, I could somehow change its terrifying course. But the deeper I delved into this technological rabbit hole, the more elusive any solution became, like trying to grab smoke with my bare hands. I found myself surrounded by error messages and unyielding lines of code that seemed to mock my amateur attempts at digital archaeology. A creeping sense of futility began to overwhelm me as I realized this challenge was completely beyond my current capabilities, no matter how desperately I wanted to solve it. I was losing myself entirely in this obsession, feeling more lost and helpless than ever before in my young life. Each failed attempt to crack the app's closely guarded secrets only heightened my paranoia and fed my dangerous obsession like fuel on an already raging fire. The boundaries between past, present, and future became increasingly blurred, leaving me trapped in a cycle of endless uncertainty that threatened to consume what remained of my sanity. Even when I changed my approach completely, trying different strategies and methodologies, the image continued its relentless degradation like a terminal illness that couldn't be cured or slowed. It had become well and truly a curse that haunted my every waking moment and invaded my dreams with visions of inevitable doom. But despite knowing how destructive this obsession had become, I found that I couldn't bring myself to stop checking the app, no matter how much pain it caused me. The day finally arrived when I could no longer ignore the destructive cycle that had completely taken over my existence and consumed everything I had once valued. I had spent far too many sleepless nights trying desperately to untangle this supernatural mystery. Too many precious days lost in a haze of anxiety and paranoid speculation. Yet despite recognizing the futility of my efforts, I still found myself crawling back to the app in desperate hope, always hoping that this time would be the last time I'd need to check. I was searching for just one glimmer of hope, or some reassurance that the future wasn't as bleak as the app seemed determined to predict with mathematical certainty. As the app loaded with its familiar digital ceremony, I braced myself mentally for whatever horror might be revealed this time. The screen flickered ominously, and my heart sank into the depths of despair as the image finally crystallized before my terrified eyes. There I was, a future version of myself, sitting completely alone in a dimly lit room that looked like a technological cave or digital hermit's den. The walls were lined with old tech equipment, multiple screens casting an eerie, unnatural glow over piles of empty takeout containers that suggested months or years of isolation. The air in the image seemed heavy and stagnant, thick with the oppressive weight of solitude that made breathing feel impossible, even through the screen. My future self looked utterly defeated, his eyes hollow and filled with a quiet despair that spoke of dreams abandoned and connections severed forever. I could feel the crushing loneliness emanating from the screen like radiation from a toxic source, seeping into my present reality and confirming my worst fears. Tears welled up in my eyes as I stared at this vision of my ultimate destiny, overwhelmed by waves of regret and sorrow that threatened to drown me completely. The app had finally shown me the true consequences of my destructive obsession, a future completely stripped of joy, connection, and everything that made life worth living. All my desperate attempts to control the future, to shape it into something I thought I wanted, had only led me down a path of complete isolation from everything and everyone I had ever cared about. I had systematically sacrificed friendships, family relationships, and basic human happiness in pursuit of a vision that had slowly transformed into an absolute nightmare of my own making. Overwhelmed by the crushing weight of this terrible understanding, I knew exactly what I had to do, even though every fiber of my being resisted the decision. With a trembling hand, I hovered over the app icon on my phone, hesitating for just one final moment before taking the most important action of my life. Checking the app had become a powerful addiction, one that had proved impossible to control or moderate despite my best efforts to limit my usage. This was the ultimate solution I could think of, the only way to break free from this digital prison that had consumed my soul, erasing it permanently. As the app vanished from my screen forever, I felt a complex mixture of profound relief and terrifying fear about what would happen next in my life. What now? I wondered desperately, feeling completely blind as I stepped into the unknown future without the app's guidance for the first time in months. It was simultaneously terrifying and liberating, a strange combination of emotions that left me feeling unsteady but somehow more alive than I had felt in ages. The future was now a blank slate, open to infinite possibilities that I couldn't see or predict, and that uncertainty was both my greatest fear and my salvation. I was finally free from the app's controlling predictions, but now faced the daunting task of rebuilding my life from the scattered fragments I had left behind in my obsessive pursuit of a predetermined future. Slowly but steadily, I began to reconnect with the world I had pushed away so completely, reaching out to friends and rejoining their conversations and gatherings with tentative hope that things could somehow be different. I feared that my self-imposed road to isolation was something I had permanently manifested, a pattern that would follow me into all future relationships and connections. But to my genuine surprise and overwhelming relief, I was met with warmth and acceptance from people who had missed me more than I ever dared to imagine. The bonds of friendship that I thought I had destroyed forever began to slowly mend, like flowers growing back after a harsh winter. "I've missed this so much," I admitted during lunch with friends, the words spilling out with unexpected ease and genuine emotion that surprised even me. They nodded and smiled with understanding, and I felt a genuine spark of joy that I had almost completely forgotten existed within my heart. I also re-engaged enthusiastically with my hobbies, picking up interests I had long neglected in my misguided pursuit of controlling the future through technological means. I spent countless hours tinkering with code again, but this time not out of desperate obsession or fear-driven need for success, but from a genuine love for creating that felt pure and unencumbered by anxiety. The passion that had once been clouded by paranoia and desperate ambition now felt clean and authentic, like rediscovering a part of myself I thought was lost forever. Reconnecting with my family proved more challenging than rebuilding friendships, but each honest conversation brought a profound sense of relief and healing that I hadn't expected. The world seemed infinitely brighter now, as if I had finally pulled my head out of a barrel of water where I had been suffocating in a prison of my own making. By losing those artificial visions of a predetermined future, I realized that I was now free to create new possibilities that reflected my genuine desires rather than my fears. Reflecting on this transformative journey, I felt a deep sense of purpose that came from within rather than from external predictions or technological promises. I realized that I didn't need to see the future to understand what was truly important in life: connection, creativity, growth, and the courage to face uncertainty with hope rather than fear. I found myself staring into a real mirror, not one muddled with technology and artificial intelligence, but a simple reflection of who I truly was. I smiled at my reflection with genuine affection, seeing myself not for what I was desperately trying to force myself to become, but for who I authentically am in this present moment. Over time, I even developed a strange appreciation for the app that had caused me so much pain and confusion, because despite being the source of countless problems, it had ultimately instilled in me a profound sense of appreciation for living in the present, rather than being trapped in anxieties about the past or future.